Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, welcome. First of all, I want to congratulate all of you for picking the most interesting session of North Capitol Forum. We're going to try our best to make this entertaining. I know it's late in the afternoon here, and also insightful as well. My name is Peru Trivedi. I'm the Vice President for External and Corporate Affairs at the... Just wait. At the Meridian International Center. We're a public diplomacy institution based in Washington, D.C. Over 60 years of partnering with the U.S. government, most notably the State Department, on the flagship public diplomacy initiatives of the U.S. government. And I'm joined by four incredible individuals on stage today. And I'm very excited for you all to meet them. I'll go down the line here. We have Shauna Hemingway, who's a senior special advisor at the Business Council of Canada and formerly a very senior diplomat in the Canadian Foreign Service as well. Please.
That's the Business Council right back there.
Vinny Onyema, Professor Vinny Onyema of Babson College, professor and chair of the marketing division of Babson College, someone that I have personally known for over 23 years, my professor at both Boston University and Babson. Just honored to share the stage with him today. Townsend Teague, CEO and founder of Teague Theater Company, and delighted to have you today along with Yvonne Ploder, Tech and Policy Advisor. So thank you and welcome to all of you. Today's panel is something slightly unique to the North Capitol Forum. I think we're hopefully bring a few different perspectives to a framework called open diplomacy. And open diplomacy is really this sort of third phase of diplomacy that we are embarking on both as North Americans, but as a world. The first phase of diplomacy being nation-to-nation diplomacy, where it was emissaries and ambassadors being sent out, sending cables, sending wires back home, talking about what was happening in the country that they were posted in. Second phase being multilateralism, born out of the Second World War, the Bretton Woods system, United Nations, etc. And now third, which is the imperative of bringing in new voices, new perspectives, new skill sets into diplomacy to help ensure a more prosperous and secure world. And so I'll kick it off with one unifying question to each of these four individuals. Shauna talking about trade and economic diplomacy, Vinny talking about entrepreneurship diplomacy and educational diplomacy, Yvonne with AI and tech diplomacy, and then Townsend with cultural diplomacy, perhaps the most important thing that unifies all of us. Talk a little bit about, in your respective spheres, why we need more trade and business diplomats, more entrepreneurship diplomats, more tech diplomats, and more cultural diplomats. And we'll start with you, Shauna.
Oh dear, I pulled the short straw today.
You're the closest one.
That's good. No, I think diplomacy has really evolved in all facets of diplomacy over the last few years. And I think one of the great advantages is that you're no longer speaking to one particular sector. So you're speaking to the broad public, right? And that's a huge advantage that we need to be taking, looking at and taking every opportunity to have that impact. And I think one of the key things I'd say for any diplomacy, and it carries over very much into the trade and economic, is the importance of having a goal, like looking to influence and work for a greater cause. So I think what's key to being effective in terms of promoting diplomacy is to have a cause greater than you. And one of the greatest examples that I could give is actually a company in Canada. It's Desire to Learn. They're a member of the Business Council of Canada. And I would say this is a great example of wildest dreams. So the CEO, when he created that company, he asked himself in his third year of university, what's the most important problem that I could solve that would have the biggest impact on the world? So for me, that's a perfect avenue to pursue diplomacy, to have that sort of impact. And he couldn't think of anything bigger than transforming the way we learn. And so he took that and he built his company around that. And that continues many, many years later. I'm thinking it's 25 years later. It continues to be what he refers back to as his pure cause. it's not saying that he dominates the learning environment, but he's part of a broader objective, and he's working hard to pursue his vision for the world and to get people on board. And I think that really serves to drum up support. Okay, the other thing that I think is very transferable is that you need to meet people where they are in any diplomatic, and I think that really applies to companies. And Rob Wildeboer, for those who were at the session yesterday, I thought it had a great example. So going in to speak to the economy minister in a country where he's really trying to promote his company and come solve his problems and solve for the better good of his company and for his employees. But he had to go in and take that perspective, fully understanding what it is that economy minister was trying to achieve with her mandate and for her government and for her people. And I think that that was a critical example. So those who weren't there, he went in and said, look, I understand what you're trying to do. I understand. I want to be part of it. In order to be an effective part of it, this is what we need to do together. And so meeting people where they are. And the third one I'd say is critical to everything is ensuring that people need to want to deliver for you. And I'd say that's key for leaders of companies, leaders of government organizations, no matter what your title or what position or what experience you've had. If people don't genuinely want to deliver a result for you, you're not going to see that result. And I think that's true engaging with your employees, engaging with your clients, engaging with your interlocutors, and certainly for business people, engaging with governments and other institutions that they need to support them. That's absolutely critical. So to sum up, goal bigger than you, meet people where they are, and keep in mind that people need to want to feel passionate and to be partnering with you to deliver something. So that's what I would say.
Spoken like a true practitioner. Vinny, please define open diplomacy in your sphere, in entrepreneurship and selling and education.
To be here today, it's a privilege. At Babson, Babson is a small school, but we think big. We want to do big things. We're just about 105 years old. We just tucked away somewhere in the outskirts of Boston. But we are number one in entrepreneurship. And I say that with all humility, because that's what defines Babson. Wherever we go, just to your point, we got big challenges, big problems. We're small, but we are not afraid. But in doing so, just talking about open diplomacy, we focus more on the open. Shona talks about meeting people where they are. We take that as a philosophy, but in meeting people where they are, we also challenge our assumptions. When we say we focus on the open, we are open to understanding the fact that people are different from us. That they have different aspirations that may be different from what we have. They speak different language, both real language and also all the body language you might think of. That we don't know it all. Yes, we are Babson, we know entrepreneurship, we breathe it, we are number one in the world, but we still believe that we don't know it all. So when we knock on people's doors, when we meet them where they are, we keep our assumptions out of the way. And when I say that, I mean, it's one thing to go and say, we want to help this group of people. We want to help this government. We want to help this community. But going there and saying, you know what, I want to learn about you first and foremost. I want to know about your pains. Tell me your story. I want to stay here with you. Ask you questions and listen and listen and listen continuously. And take all the assumptions that I came through the door and say, you know what? I don't even want to think about these assumptions. Tell me, what do you want to achieve? What have you people tried before? What worked? What didn't work? And based on that understanding, we are open to actually jettisoning, saying, you get the solution we had in mind, I don't think that will work again. We need to now recreate the problem, define the problem from the perspective of our target audience. We want to start where they are and co-create with them. We don't come with programs and say, you know what, we are Babson, you take it or leave it. We have this curriculum, you take it or leave it. We can only do it in English. No, you take it or leave it. We put simultaneous translators. No, we don't want to do that. That is arrogance. We want to be open to challenge ourselves. We will speak your language. We will define your problem with your own story, with your perspective. And that's when trust comes in. When you start seeing us speaking your language, defining your problem with your perspectives, little by little you start maybe seeing what we are trying to do reflected in what you believe. And that co-creation, when it starts happening, we at Babson, we feel that we learn also. That enriches us, even though a priori we're saying we want to go and help. But open means be open also to be challenged. Be open to change your path. And together, we can make things happen. At Babson, we try to create change makers. Whether you are a 17, 18-year-old coming to our campus, or you are an 80-year-old, 90-year-old, you want to make things happen, we want to work with you to make you a change maker, wherever you are. And just talking about meeting people where they are, just a few years ago, we decided to go and meet people who are incarcerated. We go into prisons. One would think, are you crazy? What are you going to do there in prison? To teach them how to be entrepreneurs in prison? Yes. Because entrepreneurship here at Babson is not about starting a business. Entrepreneurship for us is a mindset. A mindset that gives you that ability to not only recreate yourself, change yourself, think differently. And hopefully, when you get out there, you don't fall back. But you go out there and make change happen wherever you are. And for those who also might not see the light of the day, might not come out of that place, yes, entrepreneurship also has meaning to them. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Reframing the question and also co-creating solutions. Yvonne, what does open diplomacy mean to you? What do you think it means to other folks in the tech field and people involved in tech diplomacy?
Well, a lot of what Vinny was just talking about really spoke to me. I thought that was very well said, Vinny. And thank you to the US-Mexico Foundation for having me, Puru. It's great to be with you as well. I've had the pleasure of working at a few tech companies, and now I'm on sabbatical. I work for the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, and I am on sabbatical right now. But I have seen, both being at Uber for a few years and now working at the family office, what the private sector and what specifically technology companies role they can play when it comes to open diplomacy. And what I really like about the concept of open diplomacy is how it really changes the mindset of what diplomacy means. And it shifts the responsibility to the everyday person, the person who's not just the ambassador or in a formal role, but to the public. And what I saw both at Uber and now with Schmidt is how public and private institutions are taking a much more active role in diplomatic efforts. So I'll give you an example. In the past year, I worked and I advised with an organization incubated under Schmidt called the Private Sector Humanitarian Alliance. And what it started from was from an entrepreneur, a political entrepreneur, a policy entrepreneur by the name of Arzo. And this happened because she saw a need where the public sector in times of crisis is in need of resources, not just money, but also goods and services. And the private sector, is eager to participate. It's eager to be able to give their resources. And what's missing is this interaction and this marketplace of sorts. So that, for example, this happened when the US left Afghanistan, and we were seeing that there was a lot of need to evacuate people very quickly. And the public sector was in need and the private sector really stepped in. And so I've seen now policy entrepreneurs take a step up towards diplomatic efforts. And what I see also in open diplomacy is the transparency that some tech allows for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think perhaps the most interesting and underrated part of open diplomacy is cultural diplomacy, and the way that culture can bring us together, even when there's trade tensions, we have wars, and we have disagreements on borders and on whatever it might be. Culture is something, it seems, that's very unifying. It can be a very powerful tool. Townsend, I'm curious for your thoughts on how cultural diplomacy fits into this open diplomacy paradigm.
Thank you, Pero. I certainly have a high place value of the arts and humanities and the role that it plays in our culture. And what do I mean by that? Looking out at you and across at you, what are we all doing here? What's the point of all of these sectors if it's not for the benefit of ourselves and each other, our family, our friends, and our shared experiences while we are here? At Teak Theatrical Group, we are predominantly a producer of live theatrical content that translates to Broadway shows, which brings us around the world. We feel that we have a responsibility to hold up a mirror to society and set the stage for conversation. Recently, I read an op-ed by the CEO of Meridian that framed that perhaps we are a wheel. And I visualize that wheel as a bicycle, and we talked about sectors as the spokes, right? And how do these spokes come together? And it had me thinking about, as a storyteller, well, what is turning the wheel? What is thrusting the wheel? And I think it's the human beings that are on the bike, and we're all on the bike, and we're trying to get somewhere. In the last 2 days, I have heard wonderful and I think not surprising conversations about how we feel about where the world is heading. We've talked about isolationism, about looking inward after decades of global growth and reflecting on what that means, how we build our own economies without giving away too much so that we are not sustaining our own citizens. In arts and culture, I've had the benefit of traveling around all of the United States. We have about 240 partners that we produce with in the US. I've entered Canada through Hamilton, Ontario, and exited in Vancouver, all on a tour bus. So I've been around, but I've also taken US stories to Indonesia, to China, to Japan, and more recently am making inroads into Mexico. When I think about the rider on the bike, I think about our health. The thrusting of the wheel takes power, and in order to deliver the power as human beings, we ourselves must be nourished and healthy and capable. And we are best set to do that on a stage together in an open diplomatic form when we are communicating well, when we have from private and public sector, and we're not there yet in the conversation, but I will certainly have some additional thoughts that I'd like to share about how I think we can get there together, and just briefly to see the arts and humanities potentially not as a spoke in the wheel, but the center of the whole damn thing.
I love it. Yeah, that's art right there. Well done. Shauna, I'm curious, you having served in senior public sector and private sector roles, talk about the gender aspect of diplomacy. How can we ensure more women, underrepresented folks, a new, what is it, the pale Yale male model of diplomacy? How can we make sure that diplomacy looks and feels like the countries that it's representing, whether it's Canada, Mexico, US, anywhere?
First of all, it's not hard to find really excellent examples of strong women leaders. We've seen it in all three countries, and I think we'll continue to see it. I think one critical aspect is that women leaders need to be seen. They need to be visible. It's an absolute necessity. And sometimes I've seen women leaders need to be a bit assertive. And I have to say, I've seen too often that women are sometimes criticized for they're trying to attract attention. But please, women leaders, attract attention. It's necessary that your voice be heard. And it's not necessarily the case when you see a leader and you're breaking stereotypes, and this applies to all sorts of folks who aren't well represented at the leader level, but they need to be to enter into that space. And if you don't necessarily fit the stereotype of a leader, when you sit down at the table, that's not maybe how people see you. And so you need to present yourselves as you are and as a leader in order to be seen. And sometimes that means, being fully yourself and getting your message out there. I think also it's important for all of us to have open minds and be willing to be surprised. Again, because leadership comes in all shapes and forms. And so identifying some of those aspects, but you need to open up that mind and see people as they present themselves to you. And I think it's also that leaders look to be authentically themselves. It sounds like a lot of a very common phrasing that I've heard for many years, but I think it's really critical. In my own career, I found that, at the time I finally said, I can't be anyone else. And in fact, if I can give one example, it was when I went out as ambassador to the Dominican Republic, and I was replacing a really beloved ambassador. He was in his last role before retirement. He was excellent. He was fatherly. He came from a different stream of work in government, so completely different expertise, completely different style, totally different age, gender, all the rest. And for me, it was the first time I walked in and said, he was great. I can't copy him. I am in no way am I going to be the same leader that he was. We're not the same people. And so I leaned into being the person that I am. And it's interesting, there's a risk taking involved, but I found that it was only then that people started to see me as a leader, because otherwise I was really just a follower, copying some of the examples that I'd seen myself as well. And I think lastly, just an appeal perhaps to people who are in leadership positions now, that they need to actively look for opportunities among the people around them. So the people who aren't necessarily in leadership opportunities, including women, of course, but looking and using their skills as a leader, as an experienced practitioner, as someone who's been around for many years in a sector, and matching the skills to opportunity. So not necessarily finding someone that slots in and matches the profile you're looking for, but looking ahead and saying, I think they have the skills to do this job. And pushing people out of their comfort zones. I've worked with a lot of really excellent women who would not pursue opportunities until I presented them and said, I think you can do this. As someone in a senior position, I think you've got the skills. And then I think our role is to create those pathways and give them those opportunities to demonstrate that they already have the skills to perform the duties. So
That's excellent, Shauna. I'm actually going to skip around a little bit because I think Townsend may have, it's a good segue into my question for him. Shauna's talking about dispelling misconceptions about being more representative. Can you talk a little bit about how the arts can be a little bit more, could be a vehicle for dispelling misconceptions, especially in our North American context, but even just sort of globally?
Sure. In my personal experience, the U.S. view in terms of its investment in the arts is a bit shameful. We consume art on a couch, watching Netflix or in public, enjoying an evening out with family and friends. But how the sausage gets made is a thing of itself. In my company, our role is to vehemently protect and advocate for storytellers in order that some of these stories may reach us and bring us together. So going back to the U.S. investment, we have a massive trade surplus of export to import. We turn $1 of federal funding into $9 of private raise on top. That translates into about $27.5 billion in tax revenue to the U.S. economy. And yet we only invest 45 cents per capita into our business. So we can do better. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I observed the political process. And at some point while watching a show at the Kennedy Center, one of our large venues, this thing clicked for me, which was that legislation and through government by its people can move us, but equally, if not more powerfully, the narrative of who we are can bind us together. Of course, it can separate us as well. But with respect to the international conversation, we have been working very well with Canada for decades to just dispel some thoughts about that. It's primarily based on language, that if a playwright works for 10 years writing a play and he manages or she manages to get it up on Broadway, it's probably going to go to an English-speaking nation first before they're asked to go sit in a dark room for another 3 years and work with a translator on what's the right word for this particular feel. What's really exciting in the United States is that this past year, we have 19.5% of our population is Latino or Latino heritage. And in the most recent census, 2022 to 2023, 71% of population growth in the United States of America is Latin American heritage. There's this massive opportunity for us to begin recognizing Mexico, as we already know it is by definition geographically, as part of North America. My company has begun insisting with agencies, which it's not easy to do, UTA, CAA, name it, that Mexico is defined as being part of North America in our acquisition agreements so that we can get here faster and not have to wait for subsequent negotiation should a story resonate with our population. That's incredibly important to me. I'm probably running on time, but one thing I'd like to say is that our company is opening a show on Broadway in 2025. We won the Tony Award this year for Best Play for Stereophonic, and we are very proud that in 2025 we are opening a musical based on the HBO movie Real Women Have Curves. It is the first musical in history that will have an entirely Latin creative team. The director, the choreographer, the book writer, the composer, and the majority of our creative team. It's really important that we get, in a business context, we might call it the C-suite, right? What we mean by that is the decision makers that have the ability to influence the stories we're told. And so by putting Latin Americans, in our case, behind the decision making of the creative, we believe that that will translate more authentically to the audience about, in this case, what is a Mexican-American family's experience as a first-generation family in the United States, which is particularly important to me as I am married to a Mexican and raising a bilingual dual citizen daughter.
That's great. I actually didn't know about your Tony Awards. Congratulations, that's
Thank you.
fantastic. And the future is certainly female. The future is certainly multiracial, and in many ways, a very bright future. One of the aspects of the future is also technology and how AI is going to be playing an increasing role in our society, in our politics, our business, etc. For every aspect of human life. Yvonne, maybe you can talk a little bit about your perspectives on AI. I know it's buzzy, everybody's talking about it, it's on everybody's minds, but a perspective that perhaps we're not talking about AI right now, how it's empowering women, how, and I think it's okay for me to say this, your current role with the Harris campaign, how you think they're viewing AI policy in the coming years as well.
Sure. So I'd want to start with artificial intelligence, it being neither good nor bad. It is really a tool. And I have had the chance to now, over the past year, work on a few tools. This is on the Schmidt side of my work, some tools that we've been developing for training purposes. And really it is an asset that will have both positive and negative consequences. I don't think I'm sharing anything earth-breaking, and probably all of you are seeing this in your perspective fields, how it's changing, how people are talking about it, whether you work in healthcare, whether you work in the news and media, whether you're in a brick and mortar store. What we're seeing and how we're thinking about it is really, first is transparency, safety, and security. And how is it that these large language models, these algorithms that are driving what you see on TikTok, where we know that 59% of the US population between the ages of 18 and 29 spend over 90 minutes a day on TikTok. What are they seeing? Why are they seeing that content? How is it that TikTok has designed their algorithm to feed you certain types of information? And what is it really optimizing for? So there are positives of what you see, for example, to keep with TikTok, and then there might be things that you see on that feed that you never wanted to see or didn't need to see. And so as it relates to your personal fields, what I would encourage you all to think about is how can it be used as a tool to improve the efficiency of your work. What we're also thinking about is the workforce and the displacement of work, but really actually making people more effective at their job. I worked at Uber for a few years. I actually had the pleasure of coming here to Mexico City for 6 months. I oversaw customer support for a division of the Uber business, and we had a lot of our work in the Philippines. And that was, rote customer support interactions. Someone, received a cheeseburger when they were supposed to get a hot dog, or they never received their food at all. I'm sure some of you have experienced these things. These are interactions that we can code and we can build algorithms to deliver an even more magical experience to you when something goes wrong that doesn't require human intervention. Or what if we can take the time from 10 minutes to responding to your inquiry to 2 minutes? And what we saw was we didn't actually displace the number of agents, but we actually made them more effective and efficient at their work. And so, in short, what we're seeing with artificial intelligence, both on what I saw at Uber and now with Schmidt, is that it is a tool that we are using to improve our workflows, and we should be very aware of the side effects of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in the side effects. I'm personally thinking about, the displacement and sort of how we measure GDP in the years to come as a country's ability to move their displaced workforce into new fields, and how critical that's going to be, especially as this disruption takes place. Vinny, Professor Onyema, excuse me. You've worked on public-private partnerships and almost 300 projects and businesses worldwide. I'm curious about the learnings that you've seen, sort of the extrapolation of what are those common themes after working in so many different geographies, contexts, education institutions. What are some ways in which the projects you've worked on the learnings can be applied to be fostering this sort of concept of open diplomacy?
Thank you, Pro. And then let me remember that in those days, maybe 20 years ago in the classroom, I always tell the students, hey, I go by Vinny. Remember?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So you've forgotten. Because I was not born with titles, and those titles don't define who I am. And at Babson, when Shona was saying before, we meet people where they are, we really do at Babson. We come to the level of everybody, or we rise to the level of anyone. And that's the way. And then for the work we have done in different parts of the world that I've led, a few things that stood out. First thing, whenever an idea comes up to our mind, we don't overthink it. Go out there and talk about it. Go check it out, go validate it. Speak with the target audience, see how they react. And we're not afraid that people will steal the idea. Because if it's so easy to steal, you're better off not doing it. Because if you do, more people will jump into the market and drive you out. So first thing, don't overthink it, start selling. Selling means going out there and getting feedback, because feedback is a gift. And then the second thing, that when you go out there and get feedback, ask questions. Your question is a currency. Try to make sure that they are valuable questions. When you ask valuable questions, you get valuable responses. And of course, when you ask questions, it brings to the third point, you have to learn how to listen. And it's something we've been training ourselves at Babson to do better every day. Because for majority of people in the world, it's natural to hear something. To listen is not a natural act. It is not. And we try to remind ourselves, it is not natural to listen. So the ability to go out there and suspend what you're going to say. Suspend trying to say, okay, where is this person, or just the script you have in mind. Just Be yourself. Listen. Be interested than being interesting. And that's the thing we try to do as much as possible. And then the other piece is that the attitude towards a no. When you go out there trying to get feedback or trying to do something to make something happen, and you get a no, you get rejection. For us at Babson, no does not mean nothing. It doesn't mean you give up. No means not over. That's the way we interpret it. And no, if we want to even take it further, we say it's a navigation towards opportunity. The end means you have to navigate. The door will get slammed on your face. People will tell you your idea is nothing good. People will tell you all sorts of things. But you don't give up. So you navigate until you hit that O, which is the opportunity, which is the outcome you are interested in. And of course, we always remind ourselves of in all the projects, the one we've been successful in, some of them we have failed. But however, we sat down and said, let's debrief. Why did we fail? That the next time we're going to do it, we're going to do it better. So those are some of the learning I think we took away. And for me, maybe one of the greatest ones was that the fact that wherever we go, we try to learn something from the people, the target audience. And we make them do it better than us when we leave. So for instance, we went to a city in Colombia called Manizales. They came to us seeking for help on how to jumpstart their economy. And then we went there, we said, okay, we listened, we talked with them, and we came up with a program together. And we set an exit date, 5 years. Babson, we're going to leave this place. And we said, no, we need you for 10 years. I said, no, if we are here for 10 years, it means we failed. And the whole idea, the approach we took, that we're going to make the locals do it so well, we transfer what we know, and we learn from them, so that when we leave, they do a better job. And as we speak, that city is the #1 city on how to do business, on even how to scale businesses in the whole of Colombia. So, and Babson, we exited also with a lot of knowledge. So we write cases and we use it in our school in Boston. So that it's a two-way thing. And talking about diplomacy, that openness to know that you go to give, but you must be open to also receive and to grow as a person, as an institution. You don't know it all. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a great lesson, can be applied on many different aspects. This has been such a great audience. I've seen nobody's on their phone. Everyone's locked in. I want to go to the audience now to see if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I was just saying that my name is Jorge Ravi, work at the Canadian Embassy here. I'm a Minister Counselor on the trade side. And the question is specifically to Townsend and to Shona being a former colleague. I have responsibility for the operations of a government agency across LATAM, and I see that Canada and the US seem to be losing I don't want to call it a war, let's say the race, cultural diplomacy race to other countries, China and Russia across the region. And I'd be curious to know your perspective on that, and what is the one thing that we should be trying to do, and specifically Mexico. We see Mexico as the doorstep for North America and Latin America, of course, and a really interesting place where the two cultures collide in some cases, but also the two cultures unite. So curious to hear your perspectives, and thanks for a great panel.
Thank you very much. If you could keep the answers tight so we can get to another question as well. Shauna and then maybe Townsend?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you, Jorge. He always asks difficult questions.
Yeah.
And Peru, you've done a great
I
job.
thought it was like
moderating.
a plant.
No, I'd say if we are falling behind, perhaps we're not using all the resources and tools that are available to us. So if you look at our 3 countries, I mean, we have 3 languages, 3 of the most popular languages in the world. We have great creativity. We have diversity. We have different relationships with different countries based on our history and our practice. So if we're looking at competing internationally, let's try and capture all of those skills and all of those capabilities and start working together to see ourselves in terms of how we present ourselves and how we influence the world and how we engage with other regions as a region, right? And bring everything that we have to the table. And that includes working very closely from government to business to to civil society. Definitely the cultural sector can be absolutely critical in moving us forward. But I think that we're leaving things on the table right now by not working more closely together and competing amongst ourselves.
Well said, Ambassador Townsend.
I just to clarify, are we losing the cultural battle to China and Russia? Absolutely not. The Motion Picture Association yesterday described that we produce movies about what's great about our country and also what's really terrible. And the reason that we're able to do that is our First Amendment rights. And the reason we can create a business out of it is because we protect intellectual property ownership through copyright and other mechanisms, which allow all of us to bring stories to the world and export them. Now, I'll tell you, when I bring a Broadway show into your town, I'm going to roll in with about 100 people and maybe 10, 18-wheelers with a lot of material, a lot of technology. We're going to stay in your hotels. We're going to rent cars. We're going to put per diem money all over town, right? And we're going to be spreading culture, but also raising up the community through doing that. I don't think we're losing the race at all, but I think that there's a huge opportunity to change our mindset, that understandably when we get up in the morning, the to-do list is generally urgent, right? What do I got to do today? Well, we need to be thinking with the same urgency about how we as a society, as a civil society, are taking care of and nurturing the commonality between us, and that is investments in art, in culture, with the same urgency as telecommunications, weapons, wall building, sending people across borders, because the only thing that's going to save us at the end of the day is seeing each other face to face and saying, same.
I love that. One of our former trustees at Meridian, Bella Bajaria, was posed the same question and answered it in a similar way. We have time for una más. We have 2 minutes left, 30 seconds each. Make a prediction. Something about North America that you think is going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I know, we'll start with you.
No, great prediction. There's so much possibility and so much opportunity between our nations, and Townsend and I can both speak to the integration of families within North America, that I think the reality of North America has really evolved and really changed. And my prediction would be that we're going to harness that, and we're going to move forward as a united continent and face the challenges, face the geopolitical concerns that we heard voiced last night, and just do better. Yeah.
Thank you. Kenny?
I think for me, my prediction is that the rules of engagement are going to change. Because now the diplomacy is what was handed over. It was defined by a group of people, a group of institutions, that this is how diplomacy is done. And I think over time, we're going to see more and more all parties saying, no, hey, guess what? We have to decide. We have to decide how we're going to engage each other. We have to decide what diplomacy is. And that's what I want to see.
Love that one. Thank you, Vinny.
I think the generation that is coming up now and is really making a stand on what they want to see in the future as it relates to the changes in our climate. We're in the United States facing a very big election, here in Mexico, a new election. And so I think in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to see this generation really stand up. We're already seeing it, and take control of the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Excellent. Townsend?
Gosh, I mean, I really got to spin a lot of wind on my last one. And I think that there's more people that don't look like me up on this stage, and that's a good thing. I want to work with people that don't look like me, because I want to, as Vinny said, I want to keep learning for all of my days. And the best way to do that is, I think in the United States, like before the Europeans crossed, and look at me, I'm a descendant of European. Texas was Mexico, right? Like, these have been open borders, and it's geopolitics, and it's our forefathers that set up the premise, but they absolutely do not have any influence over where we can go together. So I'd like to see the borders open more fluidity between businesses, more ability for families to travel to visit each other and go back and forth and not have it be so damn complicated.
I can't wait for all of us to reconvene at Townsend's next Tony ceremony or big Broadway hit. I hope he thinks about us when he's up there in New York. But jokes aside, it's been such a pleasure to meet all of you. And thank you so much for all of this incredible insight. Please. Thank you.